When I pulled into the driveway that night, I had no idea what I was walking into. The invitation said small family dinner, so I pictured a quiet table, maybe 8 chairs, soft laughter, and the clinking of glasses. Instead, the first thing I saw when I opened the door was a wall of people, faces I hadn't seen in years, nearly 90 of them packed into my mother's living room. And above their heads hung a banner in bold gold letters. "Welcome, baby." My stomach dropped. For a moment, the air felt too heavy to breathe. I stood there in my silk blouse, heels clicking against the hardwood, carrying the polished calm of the woman I had become. But inside, that single word, baby, burned like a brand. It wasn't meant as affection. It was a reminder. Their favorite name for me, the one that reduced everything I had fought for down to nothing. My phone buzzed in my purse. A text from my assistant. "Your investor meeting went through. We're confirmed." I almost smiled, the irony not lost on me. Here I was, standing in front of a crowd that believed I had nothing, while a deal worth millions waited for my signature. I took a deep breath, feeling the cool metal of the necklace at my throat, a gift I never left home without. They thought tonight was their stage. But little did they know, I had come with a story of my own. I wasn't always this woman, the one who could stand tall in silk and speak with calm certainty. Back then, I was just Emily Carter, the youngest daughter, the one who never quite measured up. At least, that's what they told me. I can still see the night everything broke. I was 21, trembling in the kitchen while my mother's voice echoed sharp against the tiled walls. "You'll never make it on your own, Emily. You think life bends for little girls with big dreams? You'll come crawling back." My father sat at the head of the table, silent, like he always was, while my sisters smirked as though my failure was already written. The lump in my throat was so big, I could barely speak. My hands shook as I clutched the strap of my worn-out purse. "I don't need your permission," I whispered, though my voice cracked halfway through. I remember how they laughed, actually laughed, as if my independence were a joke. That sting never faded, not even years later. But then, a different voice broke through the noise. My grandmother, who had always been the quiet observer, stood slowly from her chair. She walked to me, pressed something into my palm, a small silver key on a faded ribbon, and leaned close. "Doors open to those who believe they deserve to walk through them," she whispered, her words soft but steady. I didn't fully understand what she meant, not then. But the weight of that key in my hand felt like the first piece of armor I'd ever owned. That night, I walked out. My cheeks were still wet, my body trembling, but my steps, they didn't falter. I didn't have money or certainty or even a plan that made sense. But I had resolve. And resolve, I learned, can carry you farther than approval ever could. It was the last night I lived under that roof. The last night I let their words define me. From that moment on, I knew I'd rather be called reckless, foolish, even lost, than stay somewhere I was never truly seen. Leaving home wasn't the dramatic liberation movies promise. It was raw, messy, and terrifying. I moved into a one-bedroom apartment in downtown Chicago with peeling paint and radiators that coughed more than they warmed. For weeks, I survived on instant noodles and black coffee, stretching $20 bills until they practically tore. Still, I carried that silver key everywhere. I wore it on the faded ribbon like a necklace, sometimes tucked under my shirt when I didn't want people to ask. Whenever doubt tried to suffocate me, I'd touch it, hear my grandmother's words, and remind myself that every locked door was just waiting for me to turn the handle. I took a job as a receptionist at a small marketing firm. The pay was awful, but I treated that desk like my launch pad. I stayed late, studying the presentations left in the trash, memorizing pitch strategies, teaching myself design software on an ancient laptop. I devoured books about branding and negotiation the way other women my age devour dating apps. One night, as I was straightening the files, the creative director, a sharp-eyed woman named Dana Mitchell, caught me sketching logo ideas on a notepad. Instead of scolding me, she raised an eyebrow. "You know you've got an instinct for this, right?" I blinked at her, certain it was a trap. But she wasn't mocking me. For the first time in years, someone saw potential instead of failure. Dana started slipping me small projects. Nothing glamorous at first, just color palettes, tagline drafts. But I poured myself into each one like it was Madison Avenue work. It wasn't easy. I made mistakes. Clients dismissed me. Coworkers whispered that I was climbing too fast. Nights stretched long with self-doubt gnawing at me, whispering my mother's voice in the dark. You'll never make it on your own. But every small win silenced her a little more. The first paycheck that didn't leave me broke by Friday. The first client who asked for me by name. The first campaign where my ideas carried the pitch. Each milestone was a stone laid on the path away from their laughter. Years blurred into one relentless climb. I saved, invested, networked, and eventually launched my own boutique firm. At first, it was just me and a secondhand desk in a rented loft, but word spread. My work had heart, precision, and something they couldn't quite name. Maybe it was hunger. Maybe it was the refusal to quit. Meanwhile, to my family, I was just Emily, the youngest, the dreamer. I never corrected them. When my sisters asked what I was up to, I sent vague replies. Just keeping busy. When my mother asked if I needed help, I said, no, I'm fine. And I was. More than fine. But I kept my success hidden. Not out of shame, but strategy. They had written my story for me once. I wasn't about to let them write the ending. When the time came, I wanted the truth to hit with the weight of every step I'd taken in silence. And now, standing in that overcrowded living room beneath the welcome baby banner, I knew the time had come. The sound of chatter hit me first. Waves of laughter, glasses clinking, forks scraping across plates. 88 people packed into that house, each face turning toward me as though I were the evening's entertainment. I forced a polite smile, the kind you wear when your skin is itching with old wounds. Emily's here, my mother's voice rang out above the noise. She looked radiant, of course, in her emerald green dress, playing hostess like royalty. She stretched her arms wide, as if summoning me to the center stage. I stepped forward, heels sinking into the rug I remembered from childhood. My sisters were near the buffet table, their eyes glinting with the same smugness I'd seen years ago. Around them, relatives whispered, my uncle nudging another with a grin that said, here comes the baby of the family. The banner overhead mocked me with every golden shimmer. Welcome, baby. My jaw tightened, but I stayed composed. I had learned long ago that silence can be more powerful than a shout. Emily, my mother purred, kissing the air near my cheek. We were just telling everyone how you're managing these days. Still at that little desk job, aren't you? The crowd chuckled lightly, the kind of laughter people use when they think they're in on the joke. I felt the old ache in my chest, but this time it didn't sting. It fueled me. I set down my clutch, straightened my blouse, and let my eyes sweep the room. Actually, I said, my voice carrying steady, that's not entirely true. A hush rippled through the room. My grandmother, seated quietly near the fireplace, lifted her gaze to me. Her eyes, clouded with age, sparkled as though she already knew. I took my time, letting the silence stretch. I don't have a desk job anymore. I own the desk, and the building, and the company inside it. Gasps fluttered through the crowd like startled birds. My sisters exchanged disbelieving looks. My mother's smile faltered, the first crack in her perfect performance. I walked to the center of the room, heels clicking, shoulders squared. For the last 7 years, I've built one of Chicago's fastest-growing marketing firms. Our clients include Fortune 500 companies. Our last campaign pulled in over $20 million in revenue. I let that number linger in the air. And next week, we're expanding to New York. Silence. Then the murmurs started, sharp whispers, wide eyes, heads turning. You're lying, one cousin muttered, though his voice lacked conviction. I reached into my clutch, pulled out my phone, and tapped the screen. On it glowed a news article featuring my photograph. Emily Carter, CEO of Carter & Company, expands to New York market. I held it high enough for the room to see. The disbelief was almost tangible. My sisters looked as if the ground had shifted beneath them. My father, silent as ever, stared at me with something unreadable in his eyes. My mother's lips parted, but no words came out. I glanced at the banner again and let out a soft laugh. Not bitter, not cruel, but certain. You've spent years calling me baby. Tonight I think we can retire that name. The room erupted, not in laughter this time, but in stunned silence that carried more weight than any insult they had ever thrown. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't standing small in their presence. I was towering. I let the silence linger, then set my phone down on the table. The glow of the articles still lit the glass, undeniable proof that their baby had grown into a woman who didn't just survive. She conquered. My mother finally found her voice. Emily, why didn't you tell us? Her tone was a delicate mix of awe and accusation, like my success had been an act of betrayal. I met her gaze evenly. Because you never asked. And when you did, it was only to measure me against your expectations. Not once did anyone here truly want to know who I was becoming. No one moved. The weight of the truth pressed on every shoulder in the room. I could feel their shame rising like heat. I didn't come here tonight to humiliate you. I continued, my voice calm, steady. But since you went out of your way to make a spectacle of me, let's use this moment for something worthwhile. I turned to my eldest sister, Caroline, who had always mocked my ambitions. You're brilliant, but you've buried yourself in gossip and bitterness. If you want a seat at my table, drop the comparisons and pursue the graduate degree you've talked about for 10 years. Otherwise, stay out of my way. Her eyes widened, shock freezing her in place. I shifted to my middle sister, Rebecca, who had spent her life performing perfection. You don't need to be a mirror of what Mom wants. I'll help you launch your bakery, but only if you stop living for applause and start baking because it lights you up. Rebecca's lips trembled, tears pricking her eyes. Then I faced my father. For the first time, he looked directly at me, no longer hiding behind silence. You sat there for years while they laughed at me. If you want me in your life, then speak. Tell me what you stand for. I don't need wealth from you, I need honesty. The room grew so still I could hear the faint hum of the chandelier. Finally, I turned to my mother, the woman who had called me baby, who had doubted every step I took. If you want a relationship with me, it has to be based on respect. Not control. Not ridicule. Respect. Otherwise, tonight will be the last time you ever see me in this house. Her painted lips quivered, but she said nothing. I straightened my shoulders. I'm not here to prove myself anymore. I know my worth. If any of you want to be part of my world, you'll have to meet me where I am, not drag me back to where I was. For the first time, the power in that room belonged entirely to me. The days that followed were quieter than I expected. No dramatic confrontations, no explosive arguments. Instead, something gentler began to take shape. Caroline sent me a message 3 weeks later, a screenshot of her enrollment confirmation for graduate school. The text beneath it read, "You were right. I've wasted enough time. Thank you for pushing me." Rebecca showed up at my office one afternoon, hands dusted with flour, eyes sparkling in a way I hadn't seen since childhood. She placed a box of pastries on my desk, raspberry tarts so delicate they melted on my tongue. "I'm doing it, Emily," she whispered. "For me, not for them." Even my father changed in his quiet way. He called one evening, his voice rough, halting. "I don't know how to be what you asked, but I'm trying." It wasn't perfect, but it was more than silence. And for him, that was a beginning. As for my mother, it took longer. Old habits cling the hardest. But one morning, she appeared at my firm, no announcement, no performance dress. Just her, in a simple sweater, clutching a coffee cup. She stood in the doorway of my office, eyes darting to the framed awards, the view of the Chicago skyline. Finally, her gaze landed on me. "You're not my baby anymore," she said softly, almost reverently. "You're a woman I don't deserve to claim, but I'd like the chance to know." Something inside me loosened then. Not forgiveness, not entirely, but the start of it. That evening, I went home and unclasped the necklace with the silver key. I laid it on my palm, tracing the faded ribbon with my thumb. My grandmother had passed the year before, but her words lived on. Doors open to those who believe they deserve to walk through them. I had opened every door they told me was locked. And now, I stood in rooms built by my own hands. Looking out over the city lights, I felt no bitterness, no need to gloat. Only strength, only peace. I smiled, slipping the key back around my neck. "Welcome, baby," I whispered to myself with a shake of my head.
No.
"Welcome, woman."